Start off talking about the transfer portal. I would say, obviously the transfer portal has changed the game and how things are done. I don't think you can look at the last 5 to 10 years and look at the teams that are placing, and just about every one of those have had to supplement their team through the transfer portal. I think 15 or 20 years ago, it was a little bit different. I think you could have had 5 or 6 guys that were competing to be NCAA Champs and All-Americans, and your team would be, in contention to be a trophy team. But the way it is now with the transfer portal, if you're looking at these teams that are placing top 5, top 10, they've got 7, 8, 9 guys that are all competing to be All-Americans and NCAA champions. And really, it's to a point where if you're not taking advantage of the transfer portal, I just don't know how you could be in a position to be competitive with those teams. So a little bit of how it's worked for us, and just how we benefit from it, but also like just how it started for us is about 6 years ago, we had about 3 or 4 guys that decided they wanted to take Olympic red shirts. And as a program, obviously those individuals, we decided that that's what we were going to do, and we were going to move forward. And what that did to our program was it kind of set us back a couple years, because now we were accounting for scholarship money that we weren't accounting for before they made that decision. So it really put about a couple year pause on what we could really do as far as recruiting high school kids. And again, that was a decision we made. We knew that was part of the decision. That decision worked out really well for us. So that was the year that COVID happened, and our guys redshirted, and then you're seeing guys, unfortunately, that didn't get to wrestle the NCAA tournament, and they didn't get that year back. We were fortunate enough that we did redshirt some of those guys, and the aftermath of the COVID was that everyone got an extra year, and our guys benefited from that. So really paused our recruiting of what we could do right away with these high school recruits. And then what happens coming off COVID and all that is the transfer portal starts, and all these guys have an extra year of eligibility that they were granted through the NCAA because of the COVID year. So it starts extending everyone's clock, and how it benefited us is we came through that period where we weren't able to recruit that much in high school, and it allowed us to bridge the gap and let us get back to where we are recruiting. And if you look, the last 2 years, I think we've had top 5 recruiting classes from kids coming out of high school. But it allowed us to bridge that gap, and really what it did was it extended those guys' clocks, and now we have guys that would have graduated that now have an extra year. And if you look at us in the last 5 years, every single guy that we've had transfer have been grad transfers. And simply put, this is why we've been able to do it, is they've got that extra year, and they're coming to us, and a lot of those guys are coming from great institutions. They've been at Harvard, Princeton, Stanford, Duke, Northwestern, North Carolina, Cornell. So what happens a lot of times is these guys, they have an extra year. These are guys that value education. Michigan is a very, very good academic school. So they value education. They're looking at the resources. A lot of them are coming from institutions where they have resources, but they probably don't have the resources that we have. And they're looking at, I have 1 year left to accomplish my goals in wrestling at the NCAA level. And they're looking at a great education. They're looking at the resources we have in place as far as, facilities, as far as, sports performance and sports psychology and sports science and everything that comes along, the nutritionists and everything that comes along with the University of Michigan. And then they're also looking at RTCs, and we have a well-established RTC with guys that they know that they're going to be able to train with day in and day out. That is a big part of their development. And I think a lot of times people are thinking, oh, they're out there and they're throwing out the best offers. I would tell you, seldom have we had the best offer when we're recruiting these guys. A lot of times they're looking at it, and they're looking at it as, they're willing to take less money to give themselves the best possible chance to accomplish their goals at the NCAA level. They're also looking at it past college and wanting to stay a part of our RTC, and they feel like that's a fit. And again, most of the time our offer is probably not the best offer, but they've valued these things and they know they have this short window to accomplish their goals, and that's usually what they make their decision around. Some of the benefits of the transfers, obviously they make a tremendous impact on your team immediately as far as your lineup goes. But I would say some of the things that you don't think of, some of the things that we've found out by going through the process as far as the pros and cons. Again, most of these guys are coming from great institutions. They've been successful academically. They've been successful wrestlers. So what it's allowed us to do is it's allowed us to bring in high character people that fit with our culture. And these guys have been great assets to our program. And, so like a Pat Brucky, who's like, he's there 1-2 months and he's a leader on our team. And Lucas Davison and Matt Feinsilver, Austin Gomez, and Josh Heinzelman last year, and Jacob Cardenas. So like great people, great for our culture, setting a great example for our young guys. And like I said, we've had some guys in the last, recruiting wise, the last 2 years, we've had some great recruiting classes. And now, we're in a position where we're able to redshirt them. That helps their development. They're able to watch and see some of these guys that have been super successful and what it takes to be successful at this level. And obviously they're able to train with these guys. So I think sometimes we get this thing where we're recruiting over guys, and I would say most of the time that's not the case. Most of the time what it's done is it's helped us redshirt guys, giving us more time to develop some of these younger guys and giving them a situation where they can look to an example of what it takes to be successful at this level, and then they're training side by side these guys, so it's helping them, as far as just what it takes to be successful at this level. Some of the core challenges we've had, anytime you're bringing in guys that have been a part of a culture for 4 years, and then you're trying to mix them into our culture, guys that have been in our room for 2 or 3 years, there's just some unfamiliarity, and there's always been a little bit of a buffer period of getting these guys adjusted and getting them on the same page. But again, these guys are remarkable people, coming from great schools and very like-minded people to the guys that we already have in our culture. And I would tell you that we have not had that many problems as far as getting these guys adjusted. It's really like within a month, you feel like the guy's been a part of your team for a couple of years. They're just very similar in how they carry themselves and just what they're about. Obviously, Sean does a great job of constantly evaluating our roster and looking for, areas where he might think someone's not feeling comfortable, and we're checking in on individuals that are just here, especially early on in the process. We're always circling back with those guys, just seeing how the transition's going, them getting moved in, getting on campus, starting to build those relationships with the guys in the team. So Sean does an awesome job, and then sometimes it's Sean, sometimes it's one of us, as far as the assistants that are making that connection with those guys. But always, he's got an eye and a pulse on how that's going. And there have been times where I think it's going great, and we check in with the guy, and it was probably a good thing we did check in with the guy. But beyond that, obviously the workouts, these guys are working out together all throughout the summer, leading into the season. We do a good job of creating events outside of wrestling that these guys are getting to do and getting to bond, just outside of practice, which is great too. I would say maybe a couple of the bigger challenges we've had are when we have older athletes that have been a part of our program that, in their mind, they've been here 2 or 3 years, and, they're probably the next guy. And I would tell you, we've had to be clear and fair in those situations with both guys, with the guy that's transferring it that way and the older athlete that's been at that weight, and we've always based it on performance. So we've had guys do wrestle-offs, and wrestle-offs go a certain way. Obviously, that's performance, and we start there. But it goes on beyond that, which is, how are they competing at tournaments? How are they competing in dual meets? And I think if you looked at the history of the last 5, 6, 7 years in those situations, the guy that's performed the best at these tournaments and duels are the guy that we end up going with. So it's just a clear conversation with both guys. You know, like, I don't feel like we're ever in the situation where we're like, oh yeah, this is your spot. Like, it's very much earned. It's not a seniority thing. This is, you're gonna come here and you gotta prove that you're the best option for us. I mean, that is the sport of wrestling. So, you know, we've been in some of those situations, not a ton, but we've been in some of those situations. Those are tough situations as a coach, because you care about both guys, right? You care about the guy that's been part of your program for 2 or 3 years. You see what they've done and given to your program. And then obviously you care about the guy that's coming in. He's been a part of your program now for months to a year. And yeah, but that happens even when there's not transfers. You know, there's guys that just, it doesn't end up working out for them, and those never feel good. But those, I would say that's one of the biggest obstacles we've had. The other one that I would say, which is a little frustrating to me, has been like just the social media and the perception of things. And it's tough because you can't really get on there and try to clear the air and say what's right and what's honest and what's not. You know, so like that stuff eats at me a little bit, just my integrity and how I try to be honest. And you see people out there putting out stuff that's just not honest. So we've had several reports where guys are, you know, they're talking to dads, they're talking to my kid, you know, trying to get him to transfer, or coaches say, oh, they've reached out to my kid, and most of those instances, and I won't say names or programs or anything like that, it's like a kid that's been there 2 years and it's not even an option for us to try to talk to him. We can't talk to it. And again, if you look back, it's all been grad transfers. Every single guy we've had are grad transfers. So these kids are not in a position where they're even close to graduating. So they're not an option for us. And I'm not saying that's the only way, but it is, unless you've just started your clock at a university, it's not going to be an option. It's grad transfer or nothing unless you're just starting. If you're half a semester or a semester in, a year at the most, but if you're 2 years in, it's not an option at the University of Michigan to transfer. You would have to have graduated. So again, you're seeing this stuff out there. It's frustrating. You know it's not accurate, but you also know like it's not even possible. You know, even if we were interested in this kid, it's not possible. So that's been frustrating. You see a lot of, you know, people putting out there that it's all money and transactions, and again, like almost never do we have the best offer. They're making, and I think people underestimate how much the RTC plays a role in this, but they're making decisions on that. And what I've seen is a lot of programs go away from RTCs. They've taken their funding away from that, and they're funding it other ways. And you know, we haven't done that. You know, we've kept our RTC, and again, I think people are making assumptions. They're putting out things about offers that aren't true. I think sometimes maybe they're getting confused with maybe an offer from another school that was been made to that guy. But I would tell you that most of the time that's not, we probably don't have the best offer. And then another thing that, you know, I think we've always, and I know we've always been straight up and honest. And what happens a ton of times is a kid's graduating, he's maybe not happy, or he needs to make the next step to go somewhere for his last year. And a lot of times what happens is that kid's already started to do the math. He's looked around at some of these other universities. He sees that, you know, a Penn State or Oklahoma State, they have a guy at his weight class. It's not going to make sense. And they've already done the math, and they're having people reach out on their behalf to our staff or kids in our team. And, you know, our response has always been, we cannot talk to a kid unless he's in the portal. So we get that a lot, where people think that we're starting to talk to kids before they're in the portal. It's never happened. Never once have we talked to a kid that wasn't in the portal already. And I know, because we're talking to coaches, and then obviously we get some of these kids that come and transfer, that some of these coaches have talked to them. Before they were in the portal, they had talked to them, and that's just never been the case for us. So just a little bit of the guiding principles that I think have helped us through this period. It's just clear expectations. I think Sean does a great job, our staff, of just what the goals are. Most guys that are coming to the University of Michigan, education, that's super important. It takes a lot of discipline to do the right things, to even put yourself in a position. And I would tell you that just the standard to get into the University of Michigan just weeds out a certain level of character and kid it's not gonna, wouldn't have gotten to our level just because of the academic standards alone. But we're clear with what it is that we expect academically. Obviously, the goals are to compete for individual and team titles. And every one of these kids have worked their butt off to be in a position to be where they're at. And the expectations are usually clear. They're clear before they even get there as a high school kid or a transfer. And then trust, just my experience of coaching now 20 years. This is the beginning. Like if a kid doesn't trust you, you can't coach him. Until he trusts you, you can't really be a good coach for that kid. And that's built, and that doesn't happen in days and weeks. It's months, years sometimes, where they start to feel like you honestly have the best interest in heart for them every single time. And what I tell guys is like, listen, I'm not gonna be perfect. I'm gonna make mistakes, but you can always know that every decision I make is with your best interest. And again, sometimes I'm wrong. Sometimes I make a decision that I think wholeheartedly is the best decision for you, and that's not how it works out, and that's life. But my intentions have always been that I'm trying to do it for the right reasons, and I'm trying to do it for you. And then integrity, you got to follow through with what you say, and you're going to be in you're going to be in war with these guys, and you just got to know that what you say, you're going to follow through with. And we've had instances with transfers that have come there and it just didn't go the way because of injury and things like that, and we've always followed through with what we said we were going to do. Even if it didn't play out the way that the kid or us anticipated it playing out, we always followed through with what we were going to say, what we said at the beginning. So, obviously that we've done it and we've done it well. And I wouldn't say it's perfect. It's never perfect, but we've had 6 All-Americans that have transferred into our program in the last 5 years. We've had an NCAA champion. We've had 2 NCAA runner-ups. That's obviously helped our team. We've won the Big Ten for the first time in 49 years. We've had 3 trophy finishes, and we've placed as high as 2nd in the country. And I would just say that we would not have been able to do that. We wouldn't have won the Big Tens without a Nick Soriano. We wouldn't have won the Big Tens without Pat Bruckey. We wouldn't have other trophy finishes without some of the transfers we had. And that's not, we still have homegrown guys and guys that I think when you're going back and thinking of Michigan that maybe you're overlooking, but we've had Miles Amin, Cam Amin, Dylan Ragusin, Mason Parhurst, who was an NCAA champion, Hodge Trophy winner, and Stefan Michik, and several other guys that we were coupling with some transfers here and there to fill gaps. And again, it's allowed us to go through this period where we weren't able to recruit and get us through the other side of this period. And again, I think you're starting to look at our team now, and it's guys like Bo Mancinona, who's a freshman in the round of 12, lost the match in overtime to be an All-American. Sergio Lemley, who was also in the round of 12, is his second year in college. And there's other really good young guys that we have a lot of expectations for, that it's allowed us to come out on the other side of this with that period where we weren't able to recruit. And again, just allowed us to be competitive during that time, but it's also allowed us to develop those guys and put those guys in the position where I think now we'll always have to use, I think that's every team. If they're going to compete to be a top 5 team, there are always going to be transfers here and there. I think what you'll see from us a lot now is like there's a foundation of good young guys that we've been able to recruit, bring in our program, develop, and now they're getting their opportunity. And we'll, we're just not perfect all the time, and we'll be out and we'll still use the transfer portal, but I think it'll be a lot of good, young, talented guys that will be the foundation of our program. So just in closing, obviously recruiting is about talent, but to bridge this gap, integrations, it's about people, it's about relationships, and I think it's about culture. I think that's what we've done a good job of, is bringing in the right guys, high-level guys academically, high-level guys athletically, and put them around resources, a coaching staff that believes in them, put them around other great kids that are part of our program, and then again, some of the resources we have, from nutrition to sports psych and sports science, and like that, all the pieces in place that we have really helped integrate these people into our program. And our goal is always, what we talk to our team a lot about, is we leave it better than we left it. So by the time you've come through this program, your goal, obviously you have goals individually, but your goal is to leave this better than when you got here. So I think that says a lot about the culture. I think we have tons of guys that is absolutely the case. They've made tremendous impacts on our team, our success, but also our culture. And I think that's something we're really proud of. Thank you guys for tuning in and watching the video. I hope this video and our experience help you as you try to explore the transfer portal and help integrate different new guys into your program. And go Blue.